Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Harmony and watched the busy traffic around Nexus Station. Ships from dozens of worlds moved in careful patterns around the massive trading hub. The year was 2387, and humanity had been part of the Galactic Council for over 100 years now. Jake smiled as he saw a Centaurian freighter dock next to a Krell warship without any problems. This was what peace looked like. "Captain, we have a message from Ambassador Rodriguez," said Lieutenant Sam Parker from the communications station. "She wants to meet with you before the next council session." Jake nodded and made his way through the corridors of his ship. The Harmony was built for diplomacy, not war. Her halls were wide and bright, designed to make alien visitors feel welcome. The crew quarters were comfortable and the conference rooms were elegant. Everything about the ship said that humans came in peace. Ambassador Lisa Rodriguez was waiting in Conference Room 3 when Jake arrived. She looked tired, which was not unusual these days. For 3 years, she had been working to keep peace between the Vorthon Empire and the Krell Federation. Both species were naturally aggressive and seemed to enjoy conflict. Lisa spent most of her time preventing small disputes from becoming big wars. "Jake, thank you for coming," Lisa said as she gestured to a chair. "I need to talk to someone who understands what we're really doing out here." Jake sat down and studied his old friend. Lisa had been Earth's chief diplomat for 5 years now. She was good at her job, maybe too good. The other species in the galaxy had come to expect humans to solve all their problems. When the Vorthons and Krell started fighting over mining rights in the Sigma system, the Council called Lisa. When the Nexari Collective accused the Thrakari of stealing their technology, they called Lisa again. Humans had become the galaxy's referees. "What's bothering you?" Jake asked. Lisa sighed and pulled up a holographic display showing the current political situation in the galaxy. Red zones marked areas of conflict, while green zones showed peaceful regions. There was a lot more red than green. "Look at this," she said, pointing to several red areas. "The Zephyrian hegemony is building up their fleet near human space. The Mordant Republic is making threats against our mining colonies. Even the Nexari are starting to talk about expansion into our territory." Jake frowned. "Are they planning something?" "I don't think they're planning anything specific," Lisa replied. "But they're getting bolder. Do you know what the Krell ambassador called humans yesterday? He said we were useful pets who could be counted on to solve problems without making trouble." The words stung because Jake knew they were partially true. Humanity had built a reputation as peacekeepers and mediators. They ran medical missions to war-torn worlds. They provided food and supplies to refugees. They consistently voted for diplomatic solutions in the Council, even when other options might be faster or more effective. The galaxy saw humans as soft and overly trusting. "Maybe that's not entirely bad," Jake said carefully. "Better to be seen as peaceful than as a threat." Lisa shook her head. "You don't understand. They don't just see us as peaceful. They see us as weak. The Vorthan military attaché told me last week that humans would probably negotiate with a supernova if they could figure out how to talk to it. He was laughing when he said it." Back on Earth, Commander Alex Turner was reviewing the latest reports from the outer colonies. His office overlooked the Atlantic Ocean, but his mind was focused on problems that were light years away. As head of Earth's defense fleet, Alex was responsible for protecting human space. It was not an easy job when your fleet consisted mostly of medical ships and lightly armed patrol vessels. The defense fleet had never fired a shot in anger. Their ships were designed for search and rescue operations, not combat. When pirates attacked human merchant vessels, the defense fleet would arrive to provide medical aid and evacuate survivors. When natural disasters struck human colonies, they would deliver supplies and temporary shelters. They were very good at helping people, but everyone in the galaxy knew they were not fighters. Alex's aide knocked on his door. "Sir, Director Bennett is here to see you." Chris Bennett entered the office with a serious expression. As head of Earth's intelligence service, Chris knew things that made him lose sleep at night. He carried a secure tablet that never left his sight. "Alex, we need to talk about the Zephyrian fleet movements," Chris said without any greeting. "Our deep space monitors are picking up massive military buildups along their border with our territory." Alex pulled up the same data on his own screen. The Zephyrians had been moving ships for weeks now. Officially, they claimed it was just routine training exercises, but the numbers were troubling. They had enough firepower in the region to destroy several human colonies. "What does intelligence think they're planning?" Alex asked. Chris was quiet for a moment. "We think they're testing us. They want to see how humans react to pressure. If we back down, other species will notice. If we stand firm, they might decide we're more trouble than we're worth." "And if they decide to attack anyway?" Chris looked out the window at the peaceful ocean. "Then we follow Protocol 7. Alex knew what Protocol 7 meant. Deep beneath the Swiss Alps, Dr. Maya Phillips was maintaining something called Project Sleeping Giant. Most humans thought it was just a historical archive, but Alex knew better. He also knew that Protocol 7 had never been activated in over 100 years of human space travel. He hoped it would never be needed. "Let's pray it doesn't come to that," Alex said quietly. Chris nodded and left without another word. Alex returned to his reports, but his mind kept drifting to the Zephyrian fleet buildup. Somewhere in the back of his thoughts, he wondered if humanity's reputation for peace was about to be tested in ways that no one in the galaxy was prepared for. The attack on New Haven came without warning. Jake Morrison was drinking coffee on the bridge of the Harmony when Lieutenant Parker burst through the door with tears in her eyes. Her hands were shaking as she handed him the emergency transmission from the colony. "Sir, you need to see this right now," she said in a voice that was barely steady. Jake activated the holographic display and immediately wished he had not. The images from New Haven were horrible beyond description. The Zephyrian fleet had arrived in the system 3 hours ago and begun bombardment immediately. There had been no demands, no ultimatum, no chance for surrender. They had simply started killing humans. The colony's main city was burning. The spaceport where supply ships landed was now a crater filled with twisted metal. The hospital where Dr. Karen White had been treating patients was gone, replaced by rubble and smoke. 2 million people lived on New Haven, and the reports coming in suggested that hundreds of thousands were already dead. "Get me a direct channel to Admiral Rodriguez," Jake ordered. His voice was calm, but his hands were clenched into fists. Lisa's face appeared on the screen moments later. She was in the council chambers, and Jake could see alien diplomats talking excitedly in the background. Her eyes were red from crying, but her voice remained professional. "Jake, I'm trying to get the council to authorize an immediate intervention. Force," she said. "But the Zephyrians are claiming that New Haven was being used as a military base. They say this was a defensive action." "That's completely false, and everyone knows it," Jake replied. "New Haven was a mining colony. They had maybe 200 security guards for the entire planet." "I know that, but the council is asking for proof. They want an investigation before they take any action." Jake stared at the screen in disbelief. "An investigation? Lisa, people are dying right now. How long will an investigation take?" 6 months, maybe more." The communication ended, and Jake stood alone on his bridge, watching the reports from New Haven get worse by the hour. The Zephyrians were not just killing humans, they were enslaving the survivors. Men, women, and children were being forced into the mining tunnels to extract the rare minerals that the Zephyrians wanted. Anyone who resisted was shot immediately. Back on Earth, President Helen Carter was meeting with her Security Council in a room deep beneath the White House. The faces around the table were grim as they watched the same reports that Jake was seeing. General Nathan Cross, the highest-ranking military officer on Earth, sat quietly at the far end of the table. "What are our options?" President Carter asked. "Officially, we can file a complaint with the Galactic Council and ask for sanctions," replied Secretary of State Bill Johnson. "We can also provide humanitarian aid to any refugees who manage to escape." "That's it? That's all we can do?" General Cross cleared his throat. There are other options, Madam President, but they would require activating protocols that have been dormant for over a century. President Carter looked at him carefully. Are you talking about Protocol 7? Yes, ma'am. The room fell silent. Everyone present knew what Protocol 7 meant, though most of them had never expected to discuss it seriously. It was humanity's most closely guarded secret, something that had been hidden from the galaxy since first contact. Not yet, President, Carter said finally. Let's see how the galaxy responds to this attack. Maybe they'll surprise us. But the galaxy did not surprise anyone. The Galactic Council issued a statement expressing deep concern about the situation on New Haven. They called for all parties to exercise restraint and promised to investigate the matter thoroughly. The Zephyrians ignored the statement completely and continued their systematic destruction of human civilization on the planet. Commander Alex Turner received new orders that same day. The defense fleet was to proceed immediately to the edge of Zephyrian space, but not to engage the enemy. Instead, they were to establish refugee camps and provide medical aid to any humans who managed to escape. Alex read the orders twice, hoping he had misunderstood something, but the meaning was clear. Earth was not going to fight back. The next few days were a nightmare for everyone involved. Jake's ship was turned into a hospital vessel as streams of refugees arrived from New Haven. The stories they told were horrible. Families separated, children forced to work in dangerous mines, elderly people left to die because they were not useful for labor. The Zephyrians were systematic in their cruelty. Dr. Phillips received a coded message in her facility beneath the Swiss Alps. It was brief and written in a language that only a few dozen people on Earth could read. The message told her to begin preliminary awakening procedures for Project Sleeping Giant. She stared at the words for a long time before typing her response. Understood. Beginning Phase 1 preparations. The galaxy watched humanity's response with interest. Many species had expected humans to at least attempt military action against the Zephyrians. Instead, they saw the same pattern that had defined human behavior for over a century. Ambassador Rodriguez appeared before the council with tears in her eyes, asking for justice, but never demanding it. Captain Morrison's ship became a rescue vessel instead of a warship. Commander Turner's fleet evacuated survivors instead of seeking revenge. The Krell ambassador made a comment that was heard throughout the galaxy. The humans are exactly what we thought they were. They will cry and beg for help, but they will never fight back. They are sheep pretending to be wolves. The Zephyrian Admiral Krex held a press conference where he explained his actions. New Haven was rich in rare minerals that the Zephyrian people needed for survival, he said. The humans were wasting these resources on unnecessary luxuries. We have taken what we need and put the remaining humans to work in a more productive manner. This is simply the natural order of the galaxy. A reporter asked if he was concerned about human retaliation. Admiral Krex laughed loudly. Retaliation? From the humans? They have been sending us diplomatic protests for 3 days now. Very polite diplomatic protests. I think we are safe from their anger. The interview was broadcast across the galaxy and confirmed what most species already believed. Humans were useful for solving other people's problems, but they were not capable of solving their own. They were victims by nature, too civilized and too peaceful to survive in a galaxy where strength determined survival. But deep in the Swiss mountains, Dr. Phillips was working day and night to wake up systems that had been sleeping for over 100 years. The equipment was ancient but well-maintained. Every few hours, she would receive another coded message asking about her progress. Her responses were always the same. Proceeding according to schedule. General Cross met privately with President Carter at the end of the week. The conversation was brief and conducted in a room where no recording devices could function. The preliminary phases are complete, he reported. We can proceed whenever you give the order. How long would it take? 72 hours from authorization to full operational status. President Carter nodded slowly. And the galaxy would never see it coming? No, ma'am. They have no idea what they're dealing with. The president looked out the window at the peaceful city beyond. Let's give diplomacy a little more time. But, General, start Phase 2 preparations immediately. Yes, ma'am. As the week ended, 3 more human colonies reported Zephyrian ships approaching their systems. The pattern was becoming clear. Humanity's peaceful response to the New Haven massacre had been interpreted as weakness. Other aggressive species were beginning to consider their own expansion plans into human territory. The galaxy was about to learn a lesson that it was not prepared for. 6 months after New Haven burned, the agricultural world of Greenfield suffered the same fate. This time, it was the Thrakari Dominion who decided they needed more farmland for their expanding population. They arrived on a Tuesday morning, and by Wednesday evening, every human settlement on the planet was either destroyed or under Thrakari control. Jake Morrison had grown thinner during those 6 months. His ship spent more time rescuing refugees than conducting diplomacy. Lieutenant Parker no longer smiled when she delivered reports. The crew of the Harmony had seen too much suffering to maintain their old optimism about galactic civilization. Captain, we're receiving distress signals from Greenfield, Parker announced from her station. Her voice was flat and emotionless now. The Thrakari are demanding that all humans evacuate immediately or face defensive action against what they call an illegal occupation. Jake closed his eyes for a moment. Greenfield fed 12 human colonies and employed over 800,000 people. The farms there had been operating for 60 years, established long before the Thrakari had even discovered space travel. But legal claims meant nothing when backed by superior firepower. Set course for Greenfield, he ordered, and send a message to Earth requesting immediate humanitarian supplies. The response from Earth was predictable. Ambassador Rodriguez would file a formal complaint with the Galactic Council. Commander Turner's fleet would establish refugee camps in neutral space. Medical supplies and temporary shelters would be provided for the displaced population, but there would be no military response, no attempt to defend human territory, no consequences for the Thrakari aggression. Lisa Rodriguez stood before the Galactic Council once again, this time holding a tablet containing population records from Greenfield. Her hands shook slightly as she spoke about children who would now grow up in refugee camps, about farmers who had lost everything their families had built over generations. The Thrakari Dominion has violated 17 different interstellar treaties, she said to the assembled delegates. They have displaced nearly 1 million human civilians without any legal justification. We ask this council to take immediate action to restore human sovereignty over Greenfield. The Thrakari representative, a massive creature with gray skin and 4 arms, responded with barely concealed contempt. The humans were using fertile land inefficiently. Our population requires immediate expansion space. We have offered to relocate the humans to less valuable territory. This is more generous than they deserve. The vote was closer this time, but the result was the same. The council expressed serious concern and promised to monitor the situation closely. No sanctions were imposed, no intervention was authorized. The message to the galaxy was clear. Attacking human colonies carried no real consequences. 3 weeks later, the Nexari Collective attacked the research station on Kepler 442b. They claimed that human scientists had stolen Nexari technology, though everyone knew the opposite was true. The station had been developing new medical treatments that could save millions of lives across the galaxy. The Nexari simply wanted the research for themselves. The attack was swift and brutal. The station's population of 50,000 researchers and support staff were given 1 hour to evacuate before the bombardment began. Most of them made it to escape pods, but decades of scientific progress were lost in a matter of minutes. The Nexari salvaged what data they could and claimed the ruins as their own territory. Commander Alex Turner was aboard his flagship, the UES Concord, when the reports from Kepler 4042b reached him. He stood in his ready room, staring at a star chart that showed 3 red marks where human worlds used to be. His aide, Captain Lucy Adams, entered with another stack of refugee transport requests. "Sir, we have requests for transport from over 200,000 people," she reported. "The refugee camps are already overcrowded, and winter is coming to the Sigma system where most of them are staying." Alex nodded absently. "What about the military situation? Are our patrol ships reporting any unusual activity?" "Actually, yes. Sir, long-range sensors have detected several unidentified vessels moving through the outer systems. They don't match any known ship configurations, and they're not responding to communication attempts." Alex looked up sharply. "How many ships?" "At least a dozen, possibly more. They seem to be conducting some kind of survey or reconnaissance mission." What Captain Adams did not know was that those unidentified ships were part of a fleet that officially did not exist. Commander Rick Powell was aboard one of them, a vessel that appeared on no registry and carried weapons that no alien species had ever seen. His mission was simple: gather intelligence on alien military capabilities while maintaining complete secrecy. Rick had been in the regular defense fleet until 6 months ago, when he received new orders that came directly from General Cross himself. He was told to report to a facility on the dark side of the moon, where he found ships and weapons that challenged everything he thought he knew about human military technology. "Commander, we're picking up Mordant Republic fleet movements near New Colorado," reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Dan Taylor. "It looks like they're preparing for another land grab." Rick studied the sensor data with growing anger. The Mordant Republic specialized in enslaving populations for dangerous mining work. New Colorado had some of the richest uranium deposits in human space, which made it an attractive target for species that needed radioactive materials for their weapons programs. "How long before they reach New Colorado?" Rick asked. 18 hours at their current speed. Rick activated his secure communication system and sent a coded message to Earth. The response came back within minutes. "Observe and report. Do not engage. Maintain operational security at all costs." The attack on New Colorado followed the same pattern as the previous 3 assaults. The Mordant Republic arrived with overwhelming force and demanded immediate surrender. When the colonial government asked for time to evacuate civilians, they were told they had 2 hours before bombardment would begin. This time, however, there would be no evacuation. The Mordants wanted the population alive for slave labor. The people of New Colorado were loaded onto transport ships like cargo. Families were separated, with strong adults sent to the uranium mines, while children and elderly were held as hostages to ensure cooperation. The conditions in the mines were deliberately harsh. The Mordants had learned that humans worked harder when they were desperate to protect their loved ones. Dr. Phillips received another coded message in her underground facility. This one was longer than previous communications and required her to access higher levels of the Project Sleeping Giant archives. As she read through the activation protocols, she felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Swiss mountain air. The equipment around her was humming with increasing activity. Systems that had been dormant for over a century were slowly coming online. Every day brought new authorizations from General Cross, each one bringing them closer to a line that humanity had sworn never to cross again. Ambassador Rodriguez appeared before the Galactic Council for the 4th time in 6 months. This time, she looked like she had aged 10 years. Her diplomatic composure was cracking under the strain of representing a species that seemed incapable of defending itself. 4 human worlds have now been attacked without provocation, she said to the assembled delegates. Over 3 million human civilians have been displaced, enslaved, or killed. The victims include children, medical researchers, farmers, and teachers. These attacks violate every principle that this council claims to uphold. The response from the council was becoming routine. They expressed deep concern, promised investigations, and called for restraint from all parties. But every species in the galaxy could see the pattern now. Humans would protest, humans would cry, humans would beg for help, but humans would never fight back. They were the perfect victims, valuable enough to be worth attacking, but too peaceful to pose any real threat. The Krell Federation began making public statements about the human problem. They suggested that perhaps humans were too weak to govern themselves in a dangerous galaxy. Maybe it would be better if stronger species took control of human territory and managed it more effectively. The comments were broadcast across the galaxy and received enthusiastic support from several aggressive civilizations. But in the depths of space, Commander Powell's hidden fleet was growing larger every day. Ships that had been sleeping in secret. Bases for over a century were being quietly activated and staffed with crews who had sworn oaths of secrecy that carried the death penalty for violation. General Cross met with President Carter in the secure bunker beneath the White House. The conversation was brief and to the point. "How much longer can we maintain this charade?" the general asked. "As long as necessary," the president replied. "But prepare for Phase 3 authorization. I have a feeling we're going to need it soon." "Yes, ma'am." "And Madam President?" "When the time comes. The galaxy is not going to be prepared for what happens next." President Carter nodded grimly. "I know, General. That's exactly what I'm counting on." The pattern was clear now. 4 human worlds had fallen in 6 months. And more. Attacks were being planned by species who had decided that humans were incapable of meaningful resistance. The attack on Luna came on a quiet Thursday morning. Jake Morrison was reviewing diplomatic reports in his quarters aboard the Harmony when every alarm on the ship began screaming at once. He rushed to the bridge to find Lieutenant Parker staring at her screens in shock. "Captain, the Vorthan Empire is attacking the Luna orbital platforms," she reported in a voice that barely worked. "They're broadcasting the assault live across the entire galaxy." Jake watched in horror as Vorthan warships systematically destroyed humanity's primary mining and manufacturing facilities around Earth's moon. The platforms had been there for over 200 years, home to 50,000 workers and their families. They represented the heart of human industrial capacity in the Sol system. The attack was not a military necessity, it was a demonstration. Admiral Krex himself was commanding the assault, and his face appeared on every communication channel in the galaxy as he explained his actions. "Today the Vorthan Empire sends a message to the galaxy," he announced, while explosions lit up the space behind him. "Even Earth itself is not safe from those strong enough to take what they want. The humans have proven they cannot defend their own territory. It is time for them to accept reality." The bombardment lasted exactly 1 hour. When it was over, the Luna platforms were gone, and 50,000 human civilians were dead. But Admiral Krex was not finished. His image appeared, again on Galactic Communications, this time addressing Earth directly. "Humans of Earth, you have 72 hours to make a choice," he said with a smile that showed too many teeth. "You will abandon all claims to your outer colonies and accept Vorthan protection for your remaining worlds. In exchange for this protection, you will provide 40% of your resources and technology to the Vorthan Empire. Refuse, and we will demonstrate that even your home world is not beyond our reach." The ultimatum was broadcast to every inhabited world in the galaxy. Most species watched with a mixture of fascination and contempt. The humans had finally been pushed to the absolute limit. Surely now they would either surrender completely or reveal whatever hidden strength they might possess. President Helen. Carter received the ultimatum while meeting with her Security Council in the Situation Room beneath the White House. General Cross sat at her right hand, his face expressionless, as they watched Admiral Krex's demands. Around the table, the faces of Earth's leadership showed a mixture of anger and something else that was harder to identify. "Recommendations?" the president asked quietly. Secretary of State Johnson spoke first. "Madam President, we could negotiate. 40% is steep, but it's better than total annihilation. Maybe we could get them down to 30%. Secretary of Defense Patricia Lee shook her head. "They won't stop at 40%. This is just the beginning. Once they have us, under their control, they'll take everything." "What about the Galactic Council?" asked CIA Director Robert Hayes. "Surely they can't ignore a direct threat to Earth itself." General Cross spoke for the first time during the meeting. "The Council has already issued a statement. They're calling for calm dialogue between all parties and offering to mediate a peaceful solution. Translation: they're going to let the Vorthans do whatever they want." President Carter stood and walked to the window that showed the peaceful gardens above their bunker. For a long moment, she said nothing. When she turned back to the table, her expression had changed. "General Cross, how long to achieve full operational status for Project Sleeping Giant?" 18 hours, Madam President." "Do it." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Everyone in the room understood what had just happened. After more than a century of peaceful coexistence with the galaxy, humanity was about to remember who they really were. Ambassador Lisa Rodriguez stood before the Galactic Council for what everyone assumed would be the last time as a representative of an independent human government. She looked exhausted and defeated as she approached the podium. Many of the alien delegates were already preparing statements of sympathy for her inevitable announcement of surrender. "Honored delegates," Lisa began in the same soft, diplomatic tone she had used for years. "I come before you today to address the Vorthon ultimatum against Earth and all human territories." The chamber was silent. Several news crews from across the galaxy were broadcasting the session live, expecting to witness the formal submission of humanity to Vorthon rule. "The human government has carefully considered Admiral Krex's demands," Lisa continued. "We have weighed the consequences of resistance against the benefits of cooperation. We have examined our options and made our decision." Lisa paused and looked directly at the Vorthon delegation. Her voice remained soft, but something in her tone made several delegates lean forward in their seats. "Humanity hereby serves notice that our policy of diplomatic restraint is under review. We strongly advise all parties to reconsider their current course of action. The window for peaceful resolution of this crisis is closing rapidly." Most of the galaxy heard these words as another example of human weakness. The same tired diplomatic language, the same empty threats, the same refusal to acknowledge reality. But a few beings in the chamber noticed something different about Ambassador Rodriguez's manner. Her hands were no longer shaking. Her voice, while still soft, carried an undertone of certainty that had been absent during her previous appearances. The Vorthon delegate responded with barely concealed laughter. "The humans speak of reviewing their policies as if they have any real options. Earth will comply with Admiral Krex's demands or face the consequences. This council has already demonstrated that it will not intervene to save human worlds." Dr. Phillips received the final authorization codes while standing in the heart of her facility beneath the Swiss Alps. Around her, machines that had been built by the greatest military minds in human history were awakening from their long sleep. The technology was over a century old, but it had been maintained with religious devotion by people who prayed they would never need to use it. She entered the codes carefully, triple-checking each sequence before pressing the activation keys. As the final system came online, she felt the mountain itself vibrate with hidden power. Somewhere above her, animals fled the area without understanding why their instincts were screaming danger. Commander Rick Powell was aboard his hidden ship when the activation order reached him. He had been watching Vorthon fleet movements for months, cataloging their positions and capabilities. Now, finally, he had permission to do something more than observe. "All stations, this is command," he announced to his crew. "We have received Authorization Omega. All personnel prepare for transition to full military operations. As of this moment, we are no longer conducting reconnaissance. We are at war. Lieutenant Dan Taylor looked up from his tactical station. Sir, what are our target priorities? Rick smiled for the first time in months. It was not a pleasant expression. Every Vorthon military asset within 50 light years of human space. We're going to remind them why their ancestors used to be afraid of the dark. The transition began immediately. Ships that had been disguised as civilian vessels suddenly revealed their true nature. Weapon systems that no alien species had ever imagined came online. Crews that had been pretending to be merchants and explorers remembered their real training. Commander Alex Turner received new orders that transformed his role from refugee coordinator to something far more lethal. The Defense Fleet's medical ships and patrol vessels were being replaced by vessels from the deep storage facilities. Ships that had been built for one purpose: to fight and win wars against any enemy, anywhere, at any cost. Jake Morrison was still on the bridge of the Harmony when his own transformation orders arrived. He read them twice before believing what they said. His diplomatic vessel was to proceed immediately to Docking Bay 7 at Nexus Station, where it would be stripped of its civilian equipment and refitted for its original purpose. Lieutenant. Parker read over his shoulder and her eyes went wide. Captain, these specs show weapon systems that I've never heard of. Where did this technology come from? Jake looked at his young officer and realized that she, like most humans her age, had grown up believing that humanity really was a peaceful species. She had no idea what they were capable of when necessity demanded it. Parker, there are things about human history that most people don't know, he said quietly. We're about to get a very unpleasant education. Admiral Krex was celebrating his victory over Luna when his intelligence officers brought him disturbing reports. Human ships were moving throughout the galaxy, but they were not following any pattern that made sense for a species preparing to surrender. More troubling, several Vorthan scout ships had simply disappeared while conducting routine patrols near human space. Find out what the humans are doing, he ordered. They should be preparing for surrender, not moving ships around, like they have some kind of plan. But the human plan was beyond anything Admiral Krex could imagine. Deep in space, Dr. Phillips watched her displays as systems across the galaxy came online. Each green light represented a facility that had been hidden for over a century, maintained in perfect condition by caretakers who understood the terrible responsibility they carried. The first sign that something had changed came when the Zephyrian Third Fleet simply vanished. Admiral Krex was reviewing intelligence reports when his communications officer burst into his command center with a look of absolute panic. Sir, we've lost all contact with Admiral Vex's fleet near the Kepler system, the officer reported. 23 warships just disappeared from our sensors. Disappeared? Ships don't just disappear, Admiral Krex snapped. Check your equipment. We've run full diagnostics 3 times, sir. The fleet was there at 800 hours, conducting routine patrol operations. At 8:03 hours, they were gone. No distress signals, no debris, no trace that they ever existed. Admiral Krex stared at the tactical display showing empty space where an entire fleet should have been. 23 ships carrying over 15,000 Zephyrian military personnel had simply ceased to exist in less than 4 minutes. It was impossible, but the sensor logs did not lie. Commander Rick Powell watched the confusion spreading through Zephyrian command from his position aboard the UES Retribution. The ship did not appear on any galactic registry because it had been built in facilities that officially did not exist. Its weapon systems were based on technology that humanity had developed during their darkest period and then hidden away for over a century. Target eliminated, sir, reported Lieutenant Taylor from the tactical station. The Zephyrian fleet has been completely neutralized. Any survivors? Negative, sir. Clean kill. No witnesses. Rick nodded grimly. The Zephyrian fleet had not been destroyed in the traditional sense. Human weapons technology had advanced far beyond simple explosives and energy beams. The fleet had been systematically disintegrated at the molecular level, their atoms scattered across several light years of space. There would be no wreckage for investigators to examine. Dr. Phillips monitored the operation from her control center beneath the Swiss Alps. Her displays showed the real-time status of Project Sleeping Giant facilities across the galaxy. For over 100 years, these installations had been hidden in asteroid fields, on remote moons, and in deep space. Now they were all coming online simultaneously. Phase 1 operations complete, she reported to General Cross. All Zephyrian military assets within 50 light-years of human space have been eliminated. Moving to Phase 2 targets. The Thrakari Dominion was next. Their fleet commanders noticed unusual energy readings near their border with human territory, but they dismissed the signals as natural phenomena. The Thrakari were confident in their military superiority and saw no reason to be concerned about human activities. Captain Lucy Adams was aboard the UES Vengeance when they received orders to neutralize Thrakari military infrastructure. Unlike the Zephyrian operation, this mission required more precision. The Thrakari had military bases scattered throughout their territory, and some were located near civilian populations. Engineering, are the selective targeting systems online? She asked. Yes, ma'am. We can eliminate military targets while leaving civilian infrastructure completely untouched. The technology that made this possible was humanity's most closely guarded secret. During Earth's final World War, scientists had developed weapons that could distinguish between military and civilian targets at the quantum level. The weapons could literally tell the difference between a soldier and a farmer based on the molecular composition of their equipment and training modifications to their bodies. The attack on Thrakari military forces was swift and surgical. In the space of 6 hours, every Thrakari warship, military base, and weapons facility simply stopped working. The ships were still intact, the bases were still standing, but nothing with military applications would function anymore. Weapons would not fire. Engines designed for combat operations would not start, and military communication systems went permanently silent. The Thrakari civilian government found themselves in complete control of their territory for the first time in centuries. Their military leaders were alive but powerless, their weapons were useless, and their ability to threaten other species had been permanently removed. Commander Alex Turner was overseeing similar operations against the Nexari, collective from his flagship, the UES Defiance. The Nexari had made the mistake of stealing human research data, and humanity had decided to return the favor with interest. Status report on Operation Reclamation, he ordered. All Nexari research facilities have been infiltrated, sir. We've recovered our stolen data and acquired their complete scientific archives. Their computer systems are now broadcasting human cultural materials on all frequencies. Alex smiled at the psychological warfare aspect of the operation. Every Nexari communication device was now playing recordings of human children singing lullabies, human poets reading their works, and human musicians performing classical compositions. The effect on the Nexari collective consciousness was devastating, but the real shock came when the galaxy realized that these operations were happening simultaneously across dozens of star systems. Human forces were striking at military targets, belonging to every species that had attacked human worlds, and they were doing it with technology that made no sense to alien military analysts. Ambassador Lisa Rodriguez stood before an emergency session of the Galactic Council. This time, she was not alone. General Cross stood at her right side, wearing a uniform that no one in the galaxy had ever seen before. Admiral Blake Richardson stood at her left, his presence radiating a quiet confidence that made several alien delegates nervous. "Honored delegates," Lisa began, but her voice was different now. The diplomatic softness was gone, replaced by something harder and more direct. "I appear before you today to address the recent military actions taken by human forces against several aggressive civilizations." The chamber erupted in confused chatter. Half the delegates had not even realized that humans possessed military forces capable of conducting such operations. The Vorthon representative stood up immediately. What military actions? Humans don't have a real military. You're a species of diplomats and refugees. General Cross stepped forward and activated a holographic display that showed the current status of Zephyrian, Thrakari, Nexari, and Mordant military forces. The display painted a picture that left the entire council in stunned silence. As you can see, he said calmly, human military capabilities have been somewhat underestimated. The Zephyrian hegemony no longer possesses any military assets. The Thrakari Dominion's weapons systems have been permanently disabled. The Nexari Collective's research capabilities have been acquired and redistributed. The Mordant Republic's slave labor operations have been terminated. Impossible, breathed the Krell ambassador. We've monitored human military development for decades. You don't have the technology for operations of this scope. Admiral Richardson spoke for the first time. You've monitored what we allowed you to see. For over 100 years, humanity has maintained two distinct technological bases. One for peaceful exploration and diplomacy, which you know about. Another for warfare, which we hoped you would never need to discover. Lisa stepped forward again, and when she spoke, her words carried the weight of absolute certainty. The galaxy has spent the last 6 months testing humanity's commitment to peace. You've learned that we prefer diplomatic solutions to military ones. But you've mistaken our preference for peace as an inability to wage war. The Vorthon delegate was struggling to understand what he was hearing. Are you threatening us? Are you declaring war on the Galactic Council? We're not threatening anyone, Lisa replied with a smile that was somehow more frightening than any threat. We're simply informing you that humanity's policy of unlimited diplomatic restraint has been revised. Our preference for peaceful solutions remains unchanged, but our willingness to accept unlimited aggression against human civilians has been permanently revoked. General Cross activated another display showing the location of hidden human military facilities throughout the galaxy. The scale of the installations was staggering. Weapons platforms that had been disguised as asteroids, shipyards hidden in nebulae, research stations that had been operating in complete secrecy for over a century. These facilities have been maintained by a small group of humans who understood that someday, despite our best efforts, diplomacy might fail, he explained. They've spent over 100 years preparing for the possibility that humanity might need to defend itself against species that mistake kindness for weakness. Dr. Phillips watched the council session from her command center, simultaneously coordinating military operations across dozens of star systems. The scope of Project Sleeping Giant was beyond anything the galaxy had imagined. Humanity had not simply hidden a few weapons. They had created an entirely parallel military infrastructure that was centuries ahead of anything their peaceful facade had suggested. President Carter addressed the galaxy directly from the Oval Office. Her speech was broadcast on every communication channel in human space and beyond. For over 100 years, humanity has chosen peace over conflict, diplomacy over warfare, cooperation over domination. We made this choice not because we were incapable of violence, but because we believed. That civilization required us to be better than our most destructive instincts. She paused and looked directly into the camera. The restoration of New Haven began on a Monday morning. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his newly configured ship, the UES Retribution, and watched human engineering vessels work with impossible efficiency. The planet that had been strip-mined and devastated by the Zephyrians was being rebuilt using technology that made alien observers question everything they thought they knew about human capabilities. Captain, the atmospheric processors are operating at 300% of theoretical efficiency, reported Lieutenant Parker. She was still adjusting to her new role aboard what was obviously a warship, not the diplomatic vessel she had served on for years. The Zephyrian mining equipment is being converted to terraforming gear. Jake nodded as he watched the progress. Reports The humans were not simply repairing the damage to New Haven, they were improving it. The planet would emerge from reconstruction as a more beautiful and productive world than it had been before the attack. It was a demonstration of power that was more psychologically devastating than any weapon. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian government," Parker continued. "They're asking for permission to negotiate the return of their captured personnel." The Zephyrians had finally realized that their missing fleets had not been destroyed. The crews were alive and unharmed, held in facilities that were so comfortable they bordered on luxury resorts. But they were definitely prisoners, and their captivity was a constant reminder that humanity could have killed them all but had chosen mercy instead. Commander Rick Powell was overseeing the most complex psychological operation in galactic history. His ships had not simply defeated enemy fleets, they had captured them intact using technology that selectively disabled weapons, while leaving life support systems untouched. Thousands of alien military personnel were now guests of humanity, receiving better medical care and food than they had ever experienced in their own service. "How are our guests responding to the education programs?" Rick asked his intelligence. "Officer, better than expected, sir. Most of them are genuinely shocked to learn about human history and technology. The Zephyrian officers are asking how we managed to hide our capabilities for so long. The education programs were perhaps the most important part of humanity's response. Every captured alien was given access to the true history of human civilization, including the wars that had nearly destroyed their species and the deliberate choice to pursue peace. The prisoners were learning that humans had not evolved past violence. They had consciously chosen to reject it. The Thrakari Dominion was experiencing a different kind of shock. Their government had discovered that not only were their weapons permanently disabled, but their entire military command structure had been quietly infiltrated by human intelligence operatives for decades. Every military communication, every strategic plan, every classified operation had been monitored and recorded. General Linda Hayes was leading the operation to return Greenfield to human control. But instead of simply evicting the Thrakari colonists, she was implementing something far more sophisticated. The agricultural world was being reorganized as a joint human-Thrakari operation, with the Thrakari providing labor in exchange for food production techniques that would solve their population crisis permanently. "Ma'am, the Thrakari Planetary Governor is asking how we knew about their food shortage problems," reported her aide. "They've been hiding the crisis from their own population for years." Linda smiled grimly. "Tell him that humans have been monitoring the nutritional health of every species in the galaxy. We've known about the Thrakari crisis longer than most of their own government officials. The revelation that humanity had been secretly monitoring the health and welfare of the entire galaxy was perhaps the most disturbing discovery for the alien civilizations. They were learning that human medical aid missions had actually been comprehensive intelligence-gathering operations disguised as humanitarian work. Dr. Phillips was coordinating the release of classified information to selected alien governments from her facility beneath the Swiss Alps. Each species was receiving carefully chosen data about their own military vulnerabilities, economic problems, and social instabilities. The message was clear. Humanity had always known exactly how to defeat them, but had chosen not to use that knowledge. "Director Bennett, the Nexari Collective is requesting a formal meeting to discuss technology sharing agreements," she reported. "They're offering full access to their research archives in exchange for human medical technology." The Nexari had discovered that their stolen research data was useless without the theoretical framework that supported it. Human science was integrated in ways that alien researchers could not comprehend. They needed human cooperation to make any sense of what they had taken. Commander Alex Turner was aboard his flagship, watching the systematic restoration of human sovereignty throughout the galaxy. Every stolen colony was being returned, every enslaved population was being freed, and every aggressive species was learning that attacking humans carried consequences that extended far beyond military retaliation. "Sir, we're receiving surrender," Offers from 12 different species, his communications officer reported. They're all offering reparations and requesting formal peace treaties. Alex studied the list of species that were suddenly eager to negotiate with humanity. 6 months ago, these same civilizations had considered humans to be convenient victims. Now they were desperate to avoid becoming enemies of a species whose true capabilities remained largely unknown. President Carter held her final war council, meeting in the Situation Room beneath the White House. Around the table sat the people who had managed humanity's most complex military operation in over a century. The results exceeded their most optimistic projections. Status report on all operations, she requested. General Cross consulted his tablet before responding. All human territory has been restored to our control. All enslaved human populations have been freed and relocated to safe worlds. All aggressive military assets belonging to hostile species have been neutralized or captured. 0 human military casualties. What about alien casualties? Minimal, Madam President. Our selective targeting protocols worked exactly as designed. We estimate fewer than 10,000 alien military deaths across all operations, most of those due to accidents during the disabling process. The President nodded with satisfaction. Humanity had demonstrated their capabilities while maintaining their moral principles. They had proven they could wage war without becoming monsters. Ambassador Lisa Rodriguez stood before the Galactic Council for what she knew would be her most important speech. The chamber was packed with delegates from every member species, all of whom were trying to understand the new reality of galactic politics. Honored delegates, I appear before you today to address the recent revelation of human military capabilities and the actions we have taken to protect our civilization. The chamber was completely silent. Every delegate understood that they were witnessing a historic moment. The galaxy's balance of power had shifted permanently. Some of you have expressed concern about humanity's hidden military infrastructure. You have asked how we managed to conceal our true capabilities for over a century. The answer is simple. We chose to hide our strength because we hoped we would never need to use it. Lisa activated a holographic display showing the scope of human military technology. The alien delegates gasped as they saw weapons platforms that could destroy entire star systems, ships that could travel faster than anything in the galaxy, and defensive systems that made planets effectively invulnerable to attack. This technology was developed during humanity's darkest period, when our species nearly destroyed itself through warfare. We chose to lock these weapons away and pursue a path of peace and cooperation. We built a civilization based on diplomacy, scientific advancement, and mutual aid. She paused and looked directly at the delegates from the species that had attacked. Human worlds, but we never destroyed our weapons. We never forgot how to use them. We simply chose not to, as long as that choice was respected by other civilizations. The Vorthan delegate stood up shakily. Are you saying that humans have been capable of defending themselves all along? That you allowed us to attack your worlds when you could have stopped us? Lisa's expression became cold. We allowed you to reveal your true nature. Every species that attacked human civilians has demonstrated that they cannot be trusted with power over others. You have shown the galaxy who you really are. Admiral Richardson stepped forward to address the military implications of the situation. Effective immediately, all species that have engaged in unprovoked aggression against human territory are subject to permanent military monitoring. Your weapons development will be limited to defensive systems only. Your expansion into other species' territory is prohibited. You can't impose those restrictions on sovereign governments, protested the Krell ambassador. We already have, Richardson replied calmly. Your weapons production facilities have been fitted with monitoring devices that will shut down any project that exceeds our guidelines. Your military communications are now subject to human oversight. Your expansion fleets have been redirected to uninhabited systems where they cannot threaten other civilizations.